Alright, hello. This is XP Scaling, and today I'm going to be covering the Bakiverse. I've noticed people haven't really taken to scaling the Bakiverse, Baki the grappler that is, and people who have on YouTube, usually I'd say they do a pretty decent job, but I want to do an in-depth version of this, seeing as he has a lot of material to go through, and obviously it's going to help this scaling because boy does he have some scaling to go over. So starting with that, we're going to be covering Baki at the age of 13 since he kind of does start his journey at the age of 13 and it's gonna help with his scaling. And his very first feat, since we're going to start it off like this, he took on 100 high schoolers. Please note, these are like thug kids. Like they grew up on the street, they're ghetto. They know what it's about, okay? Because they're gonna pull up, and that's what they're about. He proceeded to jump the guy who was running the gang, right? Their toughest guy, the biggest, strongest guy there. Pummeled him. Just he's ugly now, and he's gonna have to accept that. As he then proceeds to take on like their second in command, a guy with a katana who, despite being stabbed in the throat with it, made this guy sleep. Just took him down, no problem. He then proceeds to jump into the group of like 100 guys, all trying to hurt him, and he proceeds to take them all on. Now, something that should be noted is when he took on these 100 high schoolers, he attacked them in a way so that, despite them obviously having the better numbers than him, only 4 at a time could actually attack him, which shows that even at the age of 13, he's shown to be a decent brawler, and the fact that he's shown to be smart enough to know how to attack large groups of people. As we go by Baki-Dou, this detective guy, he even states that, dang, he knows that only 4 people can come at him at once. But we're talking about 100 versus 1. 25 fights with 4 guys. A good trick can hold so much against endurance. This is too much. Well, he is right. This does end up being a bit too much for Baki, as even though he's able to, pull off hits, take down guys, well, due to the fact that there's so many of them out there and trying to, just pull up on them, the crowd ends up honestly attacking themselves due to the fact that, they're crowding up on him when they need space to attack, which does, for the very beginning of the fight, work to Baki's advantage, but as we see later on, it doesn't, really hold out. Despite how well he's doing, he does start to get, a few, hits in. Guy manages to take a bike chain, wrap it around his leg, trip him up. They do proceed to stomp him, but he's shown to be, honestly, kind of alright. Gets up, just starts throwing punches. Moves out the way and does put his back against a fence, which honestly is, very good to do whenever you're jumped. So, the fact that he knew to do this, very clever at least. No, after this, he did start to, get the, punches in, get the wailing, He's getting jumped, so he's not doing that well. And at this point, he's really starting to take on a losing battle, but you can see right here, most of them are actually going down. So he's doing pretty good. But it's honestly once he starts, taking a few hits to the head, that he really does start to get jumped, that the detective has to, stop the fight before they actually do try to hurt him very badly. And out of the 100 guys he took down, he beat at least 37 of them. He took 37 KOs out of 100. That's impressive when you consider the fact that he took on 100 people. And he's only 13. And these guys are much older than him. Now, the reason why he took on 100 people was because, he's trying to reach to the level of his father, Yujiro Hanma. but he's going to be covered much later on. Training that Baki does is, kind of hardcore. He's been doing it since, I'd say, at least about the age of 5, since his father could force him to train. Due to his training, he just proceeds to run up the stairs of a huge, and when I mean huge skyscraper, just in like 3 minutes tops. But, Baki being, the boy that he is, kind of got, pissed off that the training that he's going through doesn't really work, at least in his eyes. I mean, he wanted to beat 100 people in one go, but only took out 37. So this does kind of, piss him off, has a little temper tantrum, breaks all his equipment like, what any rich kid would do. Being the boy that he is, goes to school, is just disrespectful. The principal punches him, he gets hurt, proceeds to, lick his blood because, boy. Starts stuff with the top athletes of his school, bullies the wrestler of the school, just breaks out, suplexes him. He's sleeping. Fights, the Karate Kid, We've all seen Karate Kid. That's what this guy's trying to be, Gets a few good hits in. Actually does pretty good against Baki due to the fact that he's technically more experienced, or in this case, more skilled in karate. But due to Baki's brawler kind of fighting style, that is, oh my god, can't talk, it actually does pretty good. And just, despite the fact that he's getting hit, is actually trying to cross hook him, showing that he does have a little bit of boxing skills in him. Though none of his attacks really does hurt Baki. I mean, just, he gets bopped quite quickly. Lasts, only like a minute. Just bop. Sleeps. Then, taking 2 out of the 5 guys that he just beat, decides, hey, jump me, guys. Come on, I can do it. Easily one shot to the top judo kid in his school. Overpowers, the sumo wrestler in his school, too. Just, makes him look stupid. And ends up fighting, the boxer of the school, who's technically, in Baki's words, the strongest out of the 5 guys there. Just, he manhandles him, treats him like a little kid. Now, Baki, at this point, he's obviously above well-trained students, well-trained athletes, at least in, high school terms. So he's just built different. He's really just built different at this point. And you're going to see why he's built different with this next feat. He pulls up in a boxing gym, right? And, this is the kind of training he's done all his life. He's, taken on harsh training, learned, various techniques. He's only 13, so he's not, honestly, at the peak of his skill. But goes to a boxing gym and challenges Yuri Chavosky. Yuri Chavosky, in this moment in the series, is honestly a world champion. Or he's at least one of them. His goal, currently speaking, at this point in time, was to honestly take control of all classes in the boxing, at least in weight. As we see from here, he's, a junior weight middle class boxer, but his skills do allow him to be well above what he should be in terms of weight. And we see that he completely bops this guy who's like the Muay Thai champion in Thailand at the time. Just bops him. He makes him sleep face first. And Yuri, before he even became a boxer, took on a whole pack of wolves. When you consider a whole pack of wolves being like around 4, 6, maybe even 12 on average, he kills all of them because, they wanted to, be his little sister. Like any good older brother would do. Someone tries to touch your sister, you gotta kill him. Let's be honest. Kill him. Has to be done. And like what I said earlier, Baki being built different challenges this, very top of the line boxer, gets put down, and proceeds to get up and said, "Wow, that's a good punch, man. Someone else can do that? Whoa." And takes quite the pummeling from Yuri. He even gets like uppercutted at one point, almost loses consciousness, yet still gets up. This shows at this point in the series, Baki, despite being 13 years old, is capable of taking on at least world-class boxing champions, or at least, top-level athletes. And that's him at 13 years old. Now, this would honestly mainly be due to the fact of how hard of the training he's gone through in his life, like, as you've seen earlier. But, like, imagine a 13-year-old kid in your high school taking on, like, a heavyweight champion. Or just, like, a professionally trained boxer. Like, that's insane. Baki then proceeds to quickly adapt. Obviously, duck and weave. But he actually uses the ropes in the boxing ring as leverage to change his position, grabs Yuri with his legs, actually does manage to get him some pummeling. He pummels the guy, but Yuri's just built different too. And, Baki, despite how well he's doing, he catches an L. This is the first L in his life. He catches it, and he catches his face first, hard, on the floor. Now Yuri, he leaves, does his thing. Baki, he goes through a very emotional stage in his life. He's 13. He never lost. Here he gets, bopped by a professional athlete. He's just like, man, I'm weak. I need to get strong. So, he goes to the mountains. Gets, all his juice, things to help him, work out with, juice, vitamins, stuff like that. Climbs up a mountain, meets Ando. Ando being a 2-meter tall guy who at one point trained with Yujiro, his father. This guy, Ando, boasts about, I could eat a lot of food, just as much as your dad. Ends up telling Baki, look, if you train with me for at least a month, you'll come back, you'll beat that guy. But, Baki took it a step further and went to this place called the Yasha Cave. The Yasha Cave, as we find out, is the cave of the Yasha Ape. The Yasha Ape being a very prehistoric gorilla that's honestly known as myth and legend at this point in the series, or at least explained by. But, Baki thinking, he's grown, trying to drink juice, no chicken tendies. He thinks, he's a man. Gets snuck up on, by the Yasha Ape. And please note, this thing's just as big as Ando. So imagine, as we see on average, gorillas could probably be 1.5, 1.8 meters. Imagine seeing a 2-meter tall gorilla just pull up on you. And, a 2-meter tall man just gets bopped by him. Ando he catches this L, but he does everything he can. Like, he tries to punch it, gets his fingers eaten, gets mauled. They're gone. He ate them. And almost gets his intestines ripped out by this thing. Like, oy. Baki does show to be a bit brave as he does jump the Yasha Ape, but he just gets backhanded. And oh no, I'm no match. He's too strong. Like what any anime protagonist goes through. He does light it on fire, but something that should honestly be noted if we lowball the Yasha Ape, if we take regular, silverback gorillas into account, say if we go off of on average for reference, the National Forest Park website can estimate that a silverback gorilla could probably lift up 815 kilograms. That's about 1,800 pounds. They can also bite with at least 1,300 pounds of force. You take that into consideration. And then when you also, if you want to really max it out for a silverback gorilla, can say, based off of the 1988 Guinness World Record book, could probably lift around 2,000 pounds. Baki does survive this, but this is honestly in the beginning of his training. As he does train to fight this gorilla, we do later on find out that this gorilla should be a lot stronger. But like, if you want to lowball this feat right here, of Baki just, taking that uppercut, that's something that would more than likely kill an average man. And yet here he is surviving. Something that we see later on in Baki's training is he's trying to unlock the endorphins in his body. Yujiro, Baki's father, explains that when you keep working out and keep training, eventually you will reach a wall you will call a limit. But that simple limit is simply your brain telling you or giving you a signal that if you keep going on, it will be dangerous. Because that signal is triggered by pain. And for most, it truly is a sign to stop. But the human body isn't something so fragile that it would break so easily. It's usually during the interval that the sign hits people. But it's up to them if they ignore it or not. And if they do, the brain will truly do something interesting. The pain will be taken away. It's not as if it will just disappear. That it's just going to be replaced by a good feeling. That is the effect of endorphins that the brain will release. It is the strongest drug known to man. It is said that it's 1,000 times stronger than morphine. If used correctly, the people who can bring this forth become really strong and can do things even after they've died. Now, Baki in his training actually manages to unlock this. He does this honestly by eating 200 kilos worth of meat, just forces it down. Doesn't even cook it, he just eats it raw. Just look at that. That's raw. R.I.P. vegans. I hope vegans aren't watching this honestly at this moment. Proceeds to train until he can actually unlock the endorphins in his body. Does this obviously through the pain that he goes through in his training. Does this multiple times actually. And in 3 months, nearing the end of his training, which he's about almost ready to fight the Yasha ape, he goes from what he was before to this. Though, to finally actually master, or I guess, bring forth the full potential of the endorphins that he can release in his body, as an act of will, Baki finds a cliff and proceeds to just jump off of it. He jumps off this cliff, obviously, to unlock the endorphins and max out what his body can do. He proceeds to dodge various things that comes forth about him. He even states, it's as if I'm falling in slow motion. But the main reason why he does this is because his father at one point explains that when you reach a certain point, you can honestly have a connection to death. But it's usually, in real life terms, kind of like when you're about to get hit by a car. Your body all of a sudden has a very high reaction. Without even looking, you can actually feel the force of the car. It's happened in real life. And this is something that Baki ends up learning how to do, thanks to him, jumping off of a cliff like a mad lad. After doing that, he proceeds to, wait for the Yasha. He pulls up, makes a fire pit so that they could fight him, so the Yasha ape can't escape, and proceeds to initiate the fight by poking its eye out. Imagine you see a gorilla, you fight it, and you poke its eye out, and then you begin to pummel it. Now, something I am going to note real quick before we go over the pummeling that he gave the gorilla. Yujiro, back in his earlier days, fought the gorilla, and he even states that it was a good time. And Yujiro, at this point, was training to become the strongest creature in the world. That means stronger than any animal or any person. And he then proceeds to, like, just grapple and just pummel this thing. But what he was not expecting was this. The Yasha ape pulls out its own eye, eats it, and is then excited. Proceeds to then grab Baki and just pummel him. Now, something that should also be noticed is that this gorilla, this Yasha ape, apparently knows how to throw hands. Like, here he is pulling a Donkey Kong or whatever the heck he's doing. Shows to actually be, about it. Has his own form of fighting. I'm not even sure what the heck you would call this, but, like, just rolls about trying to bite, scratch. And when you consider how hard a gorilla can hit, that's kind of impressive, even if we lowball and say this thing's only as strong as a gorilla. But you know what? Let's take this a step further, right? When you technically have gorilla research, you could have some people say, in the theorized level of strength, if you were to take, say, a gorilla, like a silverback, and put it under weight training and actually train it properly, you could get that gorilla to honestly lift about 4,000 pounds. But if we look about gorillafacts.org, you could honestly say that a gorilla could hit within at least 1,300 to 1,700 pounds of force. Now, when you consider that, and we also consider that can honestly hit between 9 to 4 times stronger than a person, or is at least bare minimum 9 to 4 times. Let's say, obviously here, the average punch force of a karate black belt is at least recorded at 325 pounds. We take that, right? Even though it says 4 to 9, let's maximize that. Let's say within a range of 4 to 20 times harder, right? If we take it to the max, right, for this Yasha ape, because it's more than likely it could. If we take 320 pounds of force, multiply that by like at least 20, and say a silverback gorilla could hit with, since it's honestly been stated a gorilla could be within at least 4 to 20 times stronger than a human. A gorilla, if you highball it, right, a silverback gorilla could hit with at least 6,500 pounds of force. Now, if we bring that over to a Yasha ape, like the one Baki's fighting, he's taking hits by, that would mean Baki's getting hit with the same amount of theorized force that you could honestly highball for a silverback. And yet, if we consider the fact that the Yasha ape is a prehistoric gorilla and is more than likely stronger than regular gorillas, that means Baki's grappling like the theorized level of strength for silverbacks. He's no longer like professional athlete level. He's like entered the like range for like wildlife animals in terms of strength. That is insane when you think about it, and also when you consider the fact he's only 13. He also then proceeds to get bitten by this thing. I'm not going to even try to estimate how hard a bite force this thing should have. If we go off the fact that gorillas, bite with at least 1,300 pounds of force, proceeds to get bitten in the shoulder, kicks this thing in the groin, gets thrown, and gets back up like the shoulder bite isn't even there. Proceeds to then, attack this thing with some of the martial art prowess that he does have. I am going to state Baki at this point, he's not like a typical, practice martial artist. Like, he's not disciplined in any particular style, I would say. But he should honestly be like an all-around, okay, I can, mix and match, like, mixed martial artist. As he does go down the median line of this thing, and when you compare it to a human, probably would make sense. And seeing as in Baki's situation, he kind of does need, the advantage for this thing. Pummels it up, proceeds to get scratched by it. Yeah, it had no effect on it at all. Baki at this point has shown, is about to show that even in a fight, he's willing to use different, ways of fighting. He uses a professional pitcher's throw as a punch. Like, just look at the effect that it has on the Yasha Ape. It's really, taking a hit. Uses, the way someone would smack down a volleyball as, just a drop punch as he climbs up on this thing and just bop. And then proceeds to drop kick him the way a soccer ball player would kick a ball, but, to the face. And this is actually effective enough to bring the Yasha Ape down. Baki at this point, proceeds to mount him and just starts pummeling. Just pummels him up. Now, I'm going to, give a disclaimer real quick. I don't condone child violence. If you have a younger sibling, you probably, play around with them. You horse around, you throw hands. You got to teach them how to fight. But the beating that Baki gets, he was not built for. At least, not yet. And here he is about to survive the beatdown of his life. His mother could not beat him down like this, and yet Baki gets back up. As you're about to see, he goes through it. Full force just gets slammed by this gorilla. This Yasha Ape gorilla. Immediately tries to run and just, no. The fact that he's surviving this hit right here, when this should honestly crush his spine, give him internal bleeding, to crush his organs. He's then picked up and just thrown again, just slammed, ragdolled, tackled through the stone structure where the Yasha Ape's cave was. And if we take into comparison how big the Yasha Ape is, that structure should honestly be about maybe 2 meters tall. Well, not 2 meters tall, at least I'd say 4 to maybe 8 meters tall. He gets tackled with enough force to just break that structure, that natural structure. Proceeds to then get tackled again. And the Yasha Ape at this point, he's like, why isn't he dead? Why is he still breathing? Proceeds to then, grab him again. And really just starts throwing him about. Legit really does start ragdolling him. Baki is able to manage to pull up some form of defense, but still full force by something that should bare minimum be as strong as a silverback. That's still impressive. Again, is just ragdolled, thrown, just slammed, grabbed again, thrown. I love my little brother, but I would never do this to him, even if he gets me angry. But that's me. Now, something that should honestly be noticed is the Yasha Ape at this point is legit bloodlusted and is trying to kill him. So, the whole statement that I gave you guys earlier, this Yasha Ape should be about the strength of a theorized gorilla. Well, imagine the strength of a theorized gorilla, and now it's bloodlusted. It's out to kill. It's out for blood. Here's Baki, who just survived. I repeat, survived this brutal onslaught by this gorilla. And this gorilla's still trying to kill him as hard as he can. He's trying to rip off his jaw. But little did this gorilla know, Baki had plot armor. This ended up, activating his endorphins. Sadly for the gorilla, because now, when you consider the fact that Baki, before his endorphins, was fighting this gorilla somewhat on par, the boost that he does get is enough to just, completely change the favor of the fight. He starts to feel good, proceeds to claw at the gorilla. Then, in order to feel more pain to like maximize the effects of his endorphins, bites off his own nail. And this gorilla's now shook. He's like, whoa, he was gonna die. Why is he getting up? No, he shouldn't be alive. Now, something I am gonna state, real quick. I didn't want to, waste your time with the scan. Baki has his little anime protagonist speech. I gotta get strong on my own. All right, Ando, you can't interrupt. It's about me. You're not the main character. I have to fight. And, the gorilla's just like, ooh, banana. I agree, too. And, then they continue their fight. And at this point, thanks to the endorphins now coursing through his brain, Baki's honestly able to put up a proper fight. Now, when you consider that this Yasha ape should honestly be bloodlusted, and he's now just casually or evenly matched with it, blocking its attacks, that's insane. And he's only 13. He's actually now being able to damage this thing. His blows should honestly be able to hurt this thing now at this point. And despite whatever the Yasha ape's currently doing, he's still reacting. He's still, grappling, blocking, outpacing the gorilla. And now at this point, his attacks are being more directed towards the head, towards the throat. He's shown to somewhat adapt at this point, knowing that if he can get more blows to the head, he's actually going to be able to bring down the gorilla. And he maximizes this after this blow, after this full blow, this full attack blow from the Yasha ape, that he's able to punch it directly through its ear canal, straight to its skull. At this point, he's now directly hitting the gorilla skull through his ear. I'm not sure what level of skill you need to do that, but that should still be quite, impressive when you consider that. And then proceeds to, punch him through his nose here. Again, directly to the brain. Well, mainly directly to the skull, so he could try to shake his brain. And despite the gorilla now at this point wanting to, kind of give up, proceeds to, come at him still. Baki does manages, to, for the most part, dodge his next attack, but still does, kind of cut up. But at this point, he's just feeling good. He's like, yes, not yet. Come on, keep going. And uses the gorilla's momentum to just finish him off. Just bop right into the mouth and just slams him. Slams him right to the floor. This 2-meter tall gorilla that should weigh obviously much more than a silverback is now overpowered by this 13-year-old Baki, who previously 3 months ago was about the level of like world-class athletes, like I'd say relative to that, at least at this point. He does win. The Yasha ape proceeds to, accept his L, leaves, and something that we actually do see later on is Baki does come back to the Yasha ape since his dad did, kill his wife. He returns his skull, the skull of his wife, that is, to the Yasha ape. Has this, this little conversation. Oh, I'm going to, get strong. 6 years ago, my dad, took her away from you. I'm sorry about that. My dad's kind of, evil. He's the main villain of the series. And even though, you could live about 150 years, you're kind of smart. I'm sorry. I should have been cool. And the Yasha ape, at this point kind of does befriend him, has the respect of Baki. And that's honestly how this part's going to go. So when you consider at the age of 13, Baki, who was like, relative to, say, professional world athletes at the end of, At the end of some harsh training and a fight with, a giant Yasha ape prehistoric silverback gorilla. That's kind of insane. So just to recap, again, on the average silverback, right, at most could lift around 1,800 pounds, bite with a force of 1,300 pounds. Its theorized strength should honestly be about, say, in the 4,000 pound range. Same thing with the theorized strength. Give or take, should honestly be maxed out around, 1,600 pounds. I mean, well, not 16, I mean 6,500 pounds. And then you apply all that to a prehistoric gorilla that's much bigger, much beefier, much stronger, and a lot smarter, and is obviously a much better combatant. And then he took this thing on while it was bloodlusted. That's very insane, especially at the age of 13. Now, I'm going to end this video here. This is going to be part 1, like I said, chapter 1, part 1. In his next video, he's going to take on Hanayama, a very beloved, person in the series. And then sometime after that, he's going to take on Gaia, just some random soldier. Not very impressive, sadly. They kind of waste his character. So hope you guys enjoyed. Please dislike and do not subscribe. All right, I'm built different after, reading the whole Baki series. I'm just different now. And yeah, hope you guys have a nice one.